My mother had passed away, but I still carried the burden of this anger. This narrative I had been telling my entire life wasn't about me. From the moment I stepped out of that class on that day, I quite literally never felt compelled to tell the story again.
Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Salem Speakers Podcast. Today, I'm joined with someone who has spent years helping people unlock their potential and better understand themselves from the inside out. Kim Tang is a global yoga teacher, transformational speaker, author, and family advocate who has taught and spoken around the world. Her work focuses on human performance, emotional resilience, communication, personal growth, and helping people become more intentional in the way they lead their lives and relationships. Kim, I am so excited to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. What a pleasure to meet you and to sit with you in the podcast. I can't wait.
Well, I'm excited myself. Before we get into what you're doing today, I'd really love to start with your story and really take us back a little bit, right? I want you to tell us a little bit about what's happened in your life to shape the person that you become today. And maybe, if you can, add on to that introduction I did a little bit to share with our listeners a little bit more about you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm Kim Tang, and my official title is head coach of the International Yoga Sports Federation. I'm also a breathwork facilitator, conscious connected breath. I'm a quantum healing hypnosis practitioner and what I call intuitive spiritual counsel. I do a lot of speaking on the subjects of consciousness, frankly, the whole of humanity, mind, body, breath, yoga, spirituality, chakras, relationships, nervous systems. So all of this is hugely relevant in the world that we live in today, in the moment that we stand in today, both individually and as a collective. Probably the first story I will bring in is what I call my story of forgiveness. And then I'll tell you how this kind of evolved into what I do today, more of who I am today.
Okay.
So I used to be a marathon runner. I had run 7 marathons, and believe me, I was into it, had to get my cardio. And I had a friend who kept telling me, Kim, you have to do this hot yoga class. You have to take this class, have to take this class. And I really thought it was like a stretch class in a hot room. And I was like, yeah, got to get my cardio. A stretch class in a hot room would be good. Supple muscles are far less prone to injury, but got to get my cardio.
Yeah.
Well, I was at a time in my life. I grew up with a whole lot of adversity. And what that meant was that I was mad at my mother. Let's just call it what it is. I was really mad at my mother because in my upbringing, she had made a lot of choices that were to my detriment, not in my best interest. So as I was coming of age, I was able to see with more mature perspective these choices she made and how they affected me, and it made me angry. So understand that these two roads are converging now, where my friend is saying you have to try yoga, and I'm at a time in my life when I'm pounding the pavement, right?
Yeah.
Running marathons, but doing my best, thought sorting, goal planning, life setting. And by the way, rhythmic movement with breath. So didn't know yet that was an early expression of meditation. So I start taking this yoga class. And right around that time, I had tuned into an Oprah Winfrey episode where Oprah said, Kim, not really, but she said, forgiveness is a gift you give yourself.
Nice.
Not because the other person deserves it necessarily, but because you deserve to be free from the burden you carry. I heard the right words in the right moment at the right time, because my mother had passed now. My mother had passed away, but I still carried the burden of this anger, and I definitely wanted to free myself from it, and I didn't know how. I definitely did not know how to forgive. Now I knew why I should forgive, and I knew that I wanted to, but I did not know how. Okay, so now I'm in this hard yoga class, and I'm doing a posture called camel pose. It's the deepest back bend in the class.
Okay.
So you can imagine that means your heart is open, your solar plexus is open. By the way, the throat is open, the front side body, right? Very vulnerable, wide open. And in the moment of this posture, unexpectedly, I just started crying.
Mm,
I was not being demonstrative. I was not having a pity party. I was not calling attention to myself. But I also knew that this was something I had just stashed and I needed to release it. So I let myself just turn around, lie down on my back, and I kind of quietly cried for a little bit. And then I returned to the class.
mm,
Now, let me tell you what had happened. And let me also tell you how I knew what had happened because I had, in this moment, forgiven my mother. Now,
mm.
how is it that a back bend with the front side body wide open facilitates forgiveness? Right. Because the timing, I was ready. I was ready and I wanted
Yeah.
to. Now, in that moment, I had this huge realization that I had been carrying a narrative my entire life. So everyone used to always say, "Oh, about me, she's so intense. She's so intense," right? And I used to think, like, what's the matter with me? No one can handle me. I'm so intense, right?
Yeah.
And with that intensity as my nature, combined with this narrative that I had about my mother, I used to really actually make people listen to my story. And my story started before I was even born. Now, in this moment of crying in class after a deep back bend, I had the realization that without exception, every single thing I used to say in that story had the realization that actually happened to her, not me. That was her story, not mine.
Mm,
Now, children are developmentally narcissistic in a good way. And what that simply means is that they think that everything that happens around them happens to them, especially with respect to that deepest relationship, your very mother, right? So in this moment, somehow, some way, I had this realization that this narrative I had been telling my entire life wasn't about me, it was hers. When I realized that that was her story that I had been telling kind of like my entire life, I suddenly realized, wow, she suffered terrifically. I realized how much she struggled in her life when I realized that that was hers, not mine.
yeah.
And then the natural response was that I was immediately just filled with compassion, grace, and mercy to be able to see from this perspective the life that she lived.
Yeah.
That was the forgiveness. Now, how do you know when you have forgiven someone who has passed away? Because normally, if you're still mad at someone, they walk into the room and you can feel it. Or if you've forgiven them, they walk into the room and you can feel it. You feel very free, right? But how do you know if you've forgiven someone who's passed?
Yeah.
Well, it's because remember, I used to be really attached to that narrative. I used to be defined by it in my life. By the way, limited by it in my life. And as soon as I realized that that was her narrative, not mine, it came with the realization that I am free to craft my own narrative. And it would not be the one that she crafted. If
Yeah.
you knew that story, you would know that that is not me. And if you wanted to know me, that would not be my story. So I was free. From the moment I stepped out of that class on that day, I quite literally never felt compelled to tell the story again.
Mm,
It was extraordinary. At that time, I realized there's something more to this yoga than a stretch class in a hot room. And so I started just devouring all the books I could read about not just the physical practice. Yoga is not a stretch class in a hot room. Yoga is so much more, so much more. And it really like unpacks, it like opens the door to the keys to the whole of humanity with the consciousness. And so I start to speak from these places of realizing, by the way, about nervous systems and what it means to have a nervous system that is grounded or regulated versus dysregulated, and to have little or no capacity, or the opposite, no bandwidth. Yoga's life. The body, it's a learning device for the mind, and the aspects of the mind that we cultivate on the mat,
yeah.
self-control, determination, patience, faith, and concentration. Those are skills that you learn on the mat, but you use in the entirety of your life. And that is what I bring to the podium.
I love that. Thank you so much
You're
for the
welcome.
background and the story that brings us to where we are today. I myself love marathons. I've ran two myself,
Hey.
and I was actually shooting for a sub 4 hour both times, and both times I barely missed it. And so instead of trying one more time, I decided to go even more crazy, and I'm actually training for my first Ironman, where
Wow.
I'll swim 2.4 miles, bike 112 miles, and then run a marathon at the end. And who knows, maybe I'll get my sub 4 hour marathon then. I don't know.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I get you. I get you.
So we're very similar in that nature. I'm sure I'll run. I'm actually gonna sign up for another marathon in my training program, and maybe I'll get a sub 4 there. I never did get it, but we'll keep on trying and working hard because we like chasing big things. And I love yoga myself as well. I haven't done any recently, but I need to. So I love the story. I love the background that kind of brought us to where we are today. In that though, when and how did you first realize that it's your responsibility? It seems like, based off of what I've learned from you, to help others do this same thing, right? When did you first realize that helping others was going to be such a major part of your life's work, which really brings us here today?
God, I love this question. Thank you. So, you've heard of this concept of nurture the seed.
Okay.
So before I get into that, I want to introduce some concepts. Number one of my pillars is self-cultivation leads to service. And that is because you can only give what you have. You can
Yeah,
only receive what you can carry,
that's right.
right? And you can only come from where you're at.
That's
I
right.
mean, these are the basic pillars. And so self-cultivation, I was in this time that I call creation. I owned a studio. I would get in that studio 4 or 5 hours a day in between classes, like 4 or 5 days a week. And I would just what I call nurture the seed, nurture the seed, nurture the seed, nurture the seed, nurture the seed. And then I'd post it on Facebook, and then I'd nurture the seed, nurture the seed, nurture the seed, post it on Facebook, nurture the seed, nurture the seed. But all I was focusing on was the nurturing, not even the seed.
Yeah.
And I did that for so many years, for so long, in not only developing some of the strongest, deepest, and most correct postures in the history of all lineages, this girl, but also understanding that what we're doing in that room has very little to do with the postures, right? Again, the body is a learning device for the mind, and the consciousness with which you conduct your practice is the same as the consciousness with which you conduct your life. So again, learn it on the mat and use it in the life. So here I am, just nurture the seed, nurture the seed, nurture the seed, share, share, share. And let's see. So there are two parts to it. One is I was so focused on nurturing the seed that I hardly even had noticed that the seed had taken roots and grown,
Mm,
a trunk with branches and leaves,
right.
and then and then the flowers, and then the flowers go to fruit, and then the fruit is literally vine ripened and sun sweetened, and it's falling off the branches, and I'm still just like nurturing the seed, nurturing the seed.
That's right.
And then one day I looked up and said, whoa, there's all this fruit. I need to actually share it. I have a responsibility to share this. There's more here than I need.
That's right.
Now, that's what I call self-cultivation leads to service. And for me, it was nurturing the seed. But I have to tell you, the more really specific answer to the question, the way that you phrased it, is that I did that for me. 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 Self-cultivating, self-cultivating, self-cultivating. That does not mean in a selfish way.
Yeah.
Again, you can only give what you have. And I was cultivating just with enormous fortitude that I have so much to give. And then there was this shift where I felt so complete. And I knew that I had a responsibility to share everything that I had to give. Otherwise, what good is it? What is it for?
Right.
Aha, because if one person can do it, it's special, unique, rare, and extraordinary. But if it can be taught to the multitudes, it's simply technique. And so the way that that really started to expand and expand and expand is not only in the way of me having done these things. Right now, I'm speaking about with respect to a yoga practice, and then being actually able to share some pretty masterful technique to create what's called world champions on this stage that I am the head coach of. But additionally, what really started happening naturally, organically on its own, is that someone would get on my schedule for, say, a private session, and they
Okay.
wanted me to teach them a posture, say this posture called dancer, but dancer is a back bend.
Hmm.
And we would start talking about the life. And it would turn out that the conversation about the life, the opening of the heart, the ability to connect to your truth, come from love, feel safe to say, because the head is back, the throat chakra is wide open. The conversations started to be, it was heir apparent, they were far more important than the postures. And so then people started kind of flocking to me. They thought that they were coming to me to, example, learn a posture, a very advanced posture or not. But it turned out that the talking was far more transformational, by the way, in the session, but also for the posture, right?
Yeah.
Because in the body, we get these blockages and then we guard them and we shield them and we protect them. So what I teach in a way that I call is on every level of being. And that means the level of the mind, the level of feelings and emotions, the level of spirit, which for me is the greatest truth of who we are. And then, of course, the physicality, which is the reconciliation of your entirety. So it just started happening from my own experience.
So you spend a lot of time talking about human potential. That seems to be one of your areas of expertise.
Mhm.
And so for our listeners today, what does that phrase actually mean to you? What does human potential actually mean to you?
Yeah, thank you. What a natural segue. I think you really intuitively pulled that question out because it's something I had just mentioned.
Yeah.
Now, I want to tell you just in a personal way, because again, self-cultivation leads to service. And so each of us have a life that is our custom curated curriculum. And I love to share myself with others in the form of my life, right? I find it to be hugely beneficial. Teaching on every level of being and the agreement that I've come to for myself through the work that I've done spiritually is that what I want for myself, what I want for my partner, what I want for my adult children, what I want for everyone in my life is what I want for myself. And that is that we are fully expressed on every level of being of our most authentic truth. Now, let me unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
There's this thing that I call on the level of the mind, which is the outpicturing of your consciousness. And so, for example, you say something to me, it's like a gift you're handing me. I filter it through my perception and I decide what to contribute in exchange. And then I highly consciously put it in a box with a bow. I neatly, lovingly, and properly wrap it and hand it to you. That's the outpicturing of my consciousness, right? It's my thought contribution. Now, on the level of feelings and emotions, obviously, our feelings and emotions are always in response to our deepest thoughts and beliefs, things we hold to be true about ourselves and about the world around us. So feelings come into play, our emotional guidance system, hugely important. As I said, spirit, and to be absolutely positively loved for the most authentic truth that you've expressed in its fullest expression on the level of the mind and the feelings and the spirit. And then if you were talking about a romantic relationship, the physical connection would be a natural response of the connection that you feel on all the other levels of being, connection on the level of the mind, picturing of the consciousness, to even be able to feel safe to say like exactly the truth of how you feel, right? That alone is a challenge in the world that in the moment we stand in the world today. What I would call the greatest human potential for each and every one of us to have the ability to be fully expressed on every level of being, level of the mind, feeling, spirit, and emotion, and even physical expression in whatever form, and to be fully loved and accepted for exactly that. That is human potential.
If we all have that human potential, why do you think so many people settle for less than they're capable of?
Fear. Yeah. Fear and I'm going to say limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
Limiting beliefs, precognitive agreement, what their soul has chosen to learn through in this incarnation, limiting beliefs, agreements made in fear, so obsolete agreements that we were introduced to early childhood that we tend to still abide in, really kind of unearthing that causal field where these beliefs exist is the most important part of the work so that we can release it and rewrite it.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I mean, and that almost transitions too, right? Rewriting, getting into that next thing is you also talk on resilience and performance, right? And so if
Mm.
somebody's overcoming that fear and they're trying to rewrite this, right, that kind of transfers us into this topic, right? So when life does get difficult, or even when fear cripples us from taking action, what do you think separates the people who grow through adversity from those who stay stuck in it?
So important because the ones that stay stuck in it are trying, but they haven't yet grounded in the nervous system and therefore cultivated the capacity to stay really present, calm and clear in the most extraordinary moments, which is what I call the most difficult moments. So now we're already having a conversation about number one, the nervous system, and number two, the way that the body is a learning device for the mind.
Yeah,
So the first thing is, can you, I'm going to call it stop, drop, and vortex. What I mean by that is stay very clear on the level of the mind as to, by the way, which thoughts in your mind are even yours, which
yeah,
thoughts are yours, which thoughts are someone else's, which thoughts are rooted in past, which thoughts activate the past and project it into the future, or which thoughts are just in the right here, right now, connected to calm, deep breath in through the nose, out through the nose, and clarity of mind. This is why these messages of so-called yoga, this is why this is not a niche message.
yeah,
This is for, I like to say, if you reside in a musculoskeletal system in a field of gravity, which every human on this earth does, as far as I'm concerned, then I'm talking to you. I'm
yeah,
talking to you about your nervous system. I'm talking to you about your thoughts and the effect that they have in the creation of your life. I'm talking to you about the wisdom I've gained through the journey through the self to the self that apply to the whole of humanity, right? No
yeah.
matter you're wearing a suit, you're working in business, doesn't matter, right? You're wearing saffron robes, right? I'm still talking to you
That's right.
about your humanity, about your mind, about your breath, about your
Yeah,
nervous system, about your life, about your relationships,
that's
and
right.
so on.
Well, that's amazing. You also speak, and you just segued for me, by the way. So this seems to be flowing perfectly, right? So relationships,
Yeah,
communication,
boy.
and relationship. Obviously, you're kind of talking with communication with thyself, the thoughts that you have, right? Your inner thoughts, and where do they come from? But communication and relationships, that's another area of expertise that you have that I kind of planned for today. And you said the word as we transition. So why do so many conflicts come down to, let's use that word, communication, right? Why do so many conflicts in life come down to this concept of communication?
Thank you. Yeah, that answer I blurted out a minute ago, fear,
Yeah,
but we have to unpack that. So, and just so you know, right now we're having a chakra conversation because the chakra here is called the throat chakra, and it not only relates to speaking, but also it relates to things you can't say, don't say, won't say. It also relates to hearing, your ability to listen, and so on and so on. And this is huge with just human interaction, right?
yeah,
So people are afraid to speak into their truth.
yeah,
And there are only a few things that they're afraid of. They're afraid of either actually losing something. It could be as foundational as if I say something, I might lose my job, I might lose my spouse, it might change, I might lose my stability, my security, my comfort. I might lose my good standing. It might change the way you see me. You might think less of me. We have so many reasons that we either misspeak, which we call lying, or don't speak, which is like self betrayal. When something is just not okay with you, but you can't say, don't say, won't say. And by the way, the human condition is that we mask our authenticity by the word should. SHOULD, should. So let's say, for example, in your marriage, that something is not okay with you. And
yeah,
even over a prolonged period of time, but you just don't say anything. And so you barter with yourself. Oh, I should just be happy. I should just be grateful. Oh, I should just not say anything, right? And in
yeah,
this way, we actually create a problem for ourselves. We mask our authenticity and we agree to hold ourselves in a place of unhappiness by not being able to connect to that truth, come from love, and feel safe to say. This is in all relationships. This is in a workplace. This is in a family environment. This is in friendships, everywhere you go. Now, if I may just unpack that,
Yeah.
connect to your truth. Remember the most authentic truth that you feel, your emotional guidance system, without you denying it or betraying it by saying, I shouldn't feel, in fact, the way that I really feel. But the come from love part is really the evidence of doing the spiritual work. And here's what I mean by that. People are so uncomfortable with honesty in general that sometimes the only way that they can speak into a truth is to let it build, let it build, let it build, and then they blurt it out, or maybe they go passive aggressive, maybe they speak way too loudly from a room away, knowing they'll be overheard. Maybe they tell someone who will tell someone. There's so many ways that we're indirect because we're uncomfortable with just being honest.
Yeah.
And when I say connect to your own truth, come from a lot of love, meaning as much love, self-love, love that I have for myself as the love with which I share with you. One of the most extraordinary truths, which is going to be very, very difficult for you to hear. But I say it with so much self-respect and so much respect for you, so much self-love and so much love for you that I have to tell you in the craziest way, my experience in my real life
Yeah.
is that no matter what truth you're telling, if you are able to connect to your truth, come from love, and care as much about how you feel as you care about the one with whom you're sharing the most extraordinary truth, they'll be thanking you. And by the way, they'll be, even in the most difficult conversation, they'll be like, oh my God, this is like incredible. This example of someone who can actually be this honest and loving both at once,
That's right.
right? This is the way in which honesty is the deepest form of intimacy, because I might be sharing something with you that's very hard for you to hear, but the way that it's shared in this field of trust with the absence of judgment, with a lot of compassion and respect, will actually create, appreciation, respect, gratitude, because what matters is not what happens, but how you respond to it. We know
That's right.
that, which I will add, that this will be what you make it, and you do get to choose. And if you choose this just higher way of being in all of your life, everything just goes better. It just
That's
it
right.
just goes better. It just does. It's important to the whole of humanity. Yeah.
Let's talk about how this applies to parenting. And let's talk about how this applies to, you mentioned that you were overcoming some things with the relationship to your mother. How can somebody take the information that you have and that you're sharing and apply it so that they could be better parents to raise that next generation that's coming up?
In any and all relationships, and even and especially parental relationships, the best thing that I can do for that relationship is to work on myself. And the best thing that they actually can do for their relationship with me is for them to work on themselves. They're all adults now, so they have some accountability in just the tone of their life. Now, I came through some generational trauma. And so yes, I got to work on it, the journey through the self to the self. Like I said, I really created some massive capacity in a very grounded state so that I could actually meet myself in those places and love myself in those places and forgive myself and others in those places. Because remember, you can only give what you have. And I created a great capacity to be there for myself in healing. So that's the first thing. And then I basically just reemerged and reintroduced myself to what I call my adults. They're not children. I basically reintroduced to myself to my adults in the form of kind of this work that I've done and who I am in truth in the higher expression. And at the same time, I really unlearned who I think they are. If there's anything I ever told them that they should be, I released it. And
Hmm.
I actually got to know them on their own terms, who they are with their own thoughts, their own ideas, their own circumstances, and even the way that they internalized some of our shared experiences. Because I will tell you that the parent and the child internalize those experiences very differently.
Yeah.
So you've got to first do the work for yourself before you can actually participate with another in the same journey. So that is a very important process. And I think it's what the time calls for. So we don't just keep repeating unconsciously these cyclic patterns, or maybe not even unconsciously. Maybe you don't want to, but you don't know how not to, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Kim, if there was one message that you could leave to our listeners that we could, share with the world, one message that you would want them to take away from listening to the entire podcast today, what would that one message be?
Every single decision that you make in your life, no matter how small, like what you have for breakfast, or how big, like who you choose to spend your life with and love,
Yeah.
make the decisions as if you love yourself
Yeah.
deeply and completely. When you make your life decisions from your authentic truth with self-love, you cannot go wrong, and you will shatter the ceiling of fear to come into your greatest life potential.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Kim, so much for sharing your perspective with us today, with our audience. And I think, as you just shared, one of our biggest takeaways today can be, through self love, we can experience growth. And growth doesn't happen by accident. It happens when we're willing to become more intentional, more aware, more committed to becoming the best versions of ourselves that we can, to grow, to produce that fruit. So then you have the overflow so you can serve. And so for everyone listening today, if today's conversation resonated with you, I want you to take a moment and to ask yourself, what's one area of my life that I am capable of more? Then I want you to take that action and awareness and do something with it. So, Kim, if somebody wanted to connect with you, where is the best place for them to find you, or how would they go about connecting with you directly?
Thank you. All roads lead to Kim Tang Yoga. So kimtangyoga.com, Kim Tang Yoga on Instagram, Kim Tang, it might be Kim Tang Official on YouTube, but it's an unmistakable transformational channel. Lots of talks on there. Facebook, Kim Tang or Kim Tang Yoga. So I'm easy to find. It's hard not to find me if you know my name.
So, Kim Tang it is. If you just start to Google search Kim Tang, you will find her. Kim, I've had such a wonderful time with you joining us on the podcast today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for taking time out of your day to deliver so much value for our listeners. I know this is going to impact and change the world for somebody. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for another episode of the Salem Speaker Podcast. We will see you on the next one.